Welcome back to another episode of Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. We have got a great show in store for you this week. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Coconino High School girls basketball coach Cassie Schrader to speak about how the program did against Greenway, what a strong JV season means moving forward, and gives her assessment of the region. We'll then be joined by Northland Prep Academy basketball coach Michael Gordon. He'll break down how he balances coaching multiple programs, what got him started in coaching, and speaks about his returning players. And when we return from break, we'll be joined by Verde High School girls basketball coach Mark Showers to speak about their recent playoff game. He'll share his thoughts on the promising sophomore class and what the plan is for the offseason. All of that and a whole lot more coming up right here on Off the Bench. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in Northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I'm joined now by Camp Verde girls basketball coach Mark Showers. Coach Showers, welcome back onto the show.
Hey, thanks, Phil. It's good to be back.
Well, we're happy to have you, Coach. Last time we talked, we were just kind of getting into the start of winter break. Now the season is finished. The Cowboys finished their season with an 8-10 overall record, earning them the number 24 seed in the 3A. And a play-in round game against Window Rock. Coach, how did that game go earlier this week?
It did not go well. We ran into a buzzsaw up there on the reservation. Window Rock played extremely well. I think our kids were in shock, which I've experienced before. It's a whole different level of basketball, especially girls basketball. On the res, and great experience, though. An incredible facility. We were treated extremely well by our hosts. And it's just a good experience for the kids to be able to make the state playoffs and go to an arena like that and participate.
Well, Coach, I mean, how did you feel the season went as a whole this year?
The season for me was an absolute success. I mean, to ask me where I thought these kids would be at this point in the season, I was worried we wouldn't win 5 games. And so for us overall to win 12 games and to secure a spot in the playoffs, I mean, if you'd have said that to me at the beginning of the season, I'd have said, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. There's no way these kids are going to be able to accomplish that. But they worked hard and they were able to win some games that I don't think anybody thought they would win, and they put themselves into a position to get a playoff berth. So good for them. They did a nice job.
You know, it's pretty funny, Coach, because that is something similar you mentioned when we spoke last time, was sort of like, you know, making the playoffs is going to be a goal. You didn't necessarily see this team particularly making the playoffs this year. But, of course, they succeed expectations. They make the playoffs. So I want to ask, you know, how does this goal of accomplishing the playoffs sort of help your younger players who, you know, are getting that playoff experience as sophomores or juniors? Or how does that help your juniors going into their senior year, or maybe some of the freshmen who have found their way onto the roster? I mean, what does playoff experience and how does it really benefit your players and your program going forward?
Well, I think there's kind of a couple of ways it benefits us. Number one, they get to experience kind of this fun extra season kind of a thing where, again, they go to another stadium and they're able to play, you know, in front of other fans in a neat arena. And so they think that's just cool. I mean, whatever the outcome, they were just excited to go on a long road trip. And I tell you, I'm almost 60, and long road trips are not anything I want to be a part of. So, but they loved it. They had a great time. The other thing too is, having kids in the playoffs and experiencing a higher level of play, then when you talk about that higher level of play and the things that they need to do to be able to compete at that level, then it starts making sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I do need to be in the gym more. Oh, I do need to be involved in summer workouts. Oh, I do need to do these things to be able to compete at that level. Without that experience, they can't put that together. And so it really is nice for me going into our banquet at the end of the season, saying to the parents and the kids, hey, if you want to keep competing at this level and beyond, you're going to have to put the time and effort in, because it doesn't just happen.
Obviously, Coach, you mentioned it. You guys taking a long road trip for that playoff game against Window Rock, a team that's in the more northern part of the state, up into the reservation area. I want to ask, on those long car trips, how do you sort of keep the focus? I remember we had we played a game against Murrieta Mesa, which was about 2 hours away in California for my hometown when I was playing basketball there. And I'll tell you what, it was the first time I was ever on a charter bus, and it was really nice, and we had a great time. We got absolutely destroyed, but it was mainly because Murrieta Mesa's players averaged about 5'10", and our guys averaged about 5'4". So, it was a little tough to play against a school full of fully grown men. But I want to ask, how do you keep that focus, especially during a playoff game, Coach? Because it's one thing to travel up to, go into the Maricopa area, or go into, the Coconino area for a tournament, or go over to Wickenburg or something like that. But traveling up to the more northern part of the state where you're like, 2-3 hours away, a couple hours away. I mean, how do you keep that focus, especially when it comes to playoff time?
Well, playoff time is different. During the regular season, if you travel 2 or 3 hours, you have a JV game that you can sit through. You can take the kids out, walk a little bit. They're up and they're alert because they're watching the boys play and, those kinds of things. But in a single game like this, where you're going up and you're just playing one team at a certain time, what I try to do is for instance, on this trip, we went and stopped in Flagstaff and had a meal together. Yeah. And I love to go to Cane's. We went, not sure whether I can say it on the air, but
no, it's okay. They do want to sponsor.
Yeah. We went to Cane's, had a great time. Kids, and then we take our time. Then we go on up and we get there with enough time to be able to walk around, get on the court, kind of like the old Hoosier thing where you go into the arena and hey, the baskets are all 10 feet. The rooms are all 10 feet in every gym. The courts are the same size. It's just the arena's bigger. And so we talk about some of those things and prepare ourselves for the game. But the other thing is that each team has its own personality.
Yeah.
Every team I've coached has a little bit different personality depending on the personnel. And so you take that personality, I think especially with girls, and you figure out, okay, what works with this group? Some things work with certain groups and some things don't work with other groups. And you have to, through the relationships that you've built, figure out what works with each group and go with it from there.
Well, getting back to this season, Coach, during region play, the Cowboys went 4-6. Coach, second year competing in the 3A this season. Last year, you guys were welcomed into the 3A, coming from the 2A in 2019. So I want to ask, how did you feel about the region this year?
Well, the region's perfect for us because we were able to compete with most teams on most nights. There are some regions in the 3A which that would not be the case. And from a historical standpoint, we've been competing with each of those schools for a number of years. Even for our Freedom Games, when we were in the 2A, we still played Wickenburg. We still played Chino Valley. Right. We still played Northwest Christian at times. So, these are relationships we've had for years and years. So the region for us is perfect in terms of schools that we enjoy being with, we were able to compete with. The difference for us in the girls level, we're down a little bit in talent, last year and this year. I've had about a 20-year run with some pretty solid, talented kids. And so this has been a little bit different these last couple of years. But again, as I mentioned, saying that, this season is, again, probably one of the most successful seasons I've ever had, because even though there's less talent, these kids worked hard and put themselves in a position to have some success. And that's great.
Coach, we talked a little bit about your seniors the last time you were on the program, but I just want to ask, considering we're now at the end of the season, is there anything else you want to say about this senior class?
Well, they exceeded expectations. Addie Caballero, she played with a group of kids the last few years that were very talented, and she was everybody's little sister and, that kind of thing. And she's had to step up and become more of a scorer this year. In fact, really one of our only scorers, and play differently than she's been able to play in the past. But she's taken that on and she's made that adjustment. And that's part of where our success is. Mckenna Martin has always been in the shadows behind J.C. Finley a couple of years ago, and Deja Thompson and some of these kids that were very talented. And she's worked extremely hard to be able to score 6, 8, 10 points here and there to be able to put us over the top in some wins. And then you had Summer Bass. I mean, Summer Bass had the greatest game of her career against Fountain Hills, the last regular season game. I never thought in a million years Summer Bass would score 14 points and grab, I think she had 15 rebounds or something. So she just elevated herself in this situation to be able to compete. So, and I told him last night after the game, we can say whatever we want about the playoff game, but these three seniors were, not only did they elevate their game for us to be successful, but they were able to really build relationships and gather those younger kids to bring them along and make them feel like they were a part of what's going on. And there's not enough words to say, something about that. That makes it huge, especially with girls. Yeah. That whole relational piece is huge. And they were able to do that with these younger kids and do a great job.
Coach, I want to ask a bit of a weird question. You talk about that 2019 team, obviously a great program. You talk about J.C. Finley leading that 2019 team to a state championship appearance. 2020, obviously more of a transitional year, but here in 2021, you guys are now moving and shifting back into sort of contending again. So I want to ask, and it's not a question I had prepared, but something that I thought of just now. How do you approach those transitional years? Obviously, 2019, fantastic year. 2020 struggled a little bit, but here in 2021, you make the playoffs. You're trying to build upon that. So I'm just curious, how do you sort of approach those transitional years, and what do you do to try to get back to, to where Camp Verde was just a couple seasons ago? How do you kind of make your way back to that area?
So what we talk about in small rural schools is everything is cyclical. You have good classes come through, and then you have some down times, and so you have to figure out how to compete. And to me, that's the most fun, because then you have to fit your system to the personnel you have. See, those coaches in the bigger schools, they grab the personnel that fits their system. Right. And it isn't like that in small rural schools. You're constantly trying to figure out how to make this work. So in these situations, you have to be able to get time for your younger kids. You have to look forward to the future and say, okay, we have these kids from 7th and 8th grade that are going to be coming up, and maybe they have this size or this ability or whatever it happens to be. So how am I going to fit all of these together in another year or two, when we might have the best opportunity to be successful at a high level? Yeah. And, when you have two solid kids, two strong kids, then how do you develop some of those fringe kids so that they can participate and be helpful, as teammates? So part of that has to do with what system do you develop, what fundamentals do you work on? I mean, there's all these things that you have to start preparing to be able to put all of these pieces together, and they could be 2, 3, 4 years out. Yeah.
I know, Coach, you'd love to be one of those private schools that can recruit out players and go find yourself a couple, another couple J.C. Finleys and, to fill out the rest of the roster. But you're right. The rural schools, especially here, and you're battling along with Camp Verde being in the area. You've also got Mingus Union High School, which isn't too far away. You've got Sedona, which isn't too far away as well. So not only are you competing with, trying to find the best talent that's available, but also trying to pull that talent and attract that talent to Camp Verde. So I really hope that at some point they change those rules so that, it's a little more even in terms of grabbing those players. But I really like what you said in terms of fitting your system to the players you have, as opposed to what you see with other schools and other programs, which is them finding players that fit their system. Right. But Coach, I want to talk about some of those players that you do have who have been fitting the system this year. Obviously, you've got you returned 7 players from the roster. You've got another strong sophomore class on the roster this year. What do you think they can accomplish in the next 2 seasons at Camp Verde?
So, obviously, as I mentioned before, what we look at is what we have coming up from the 8th grade class, and will they be able to supplement what we currently have, on our campus. I have 2 junior girls that will be seniors this next year, Deanna Ronzamendi and Erica Graves. And, we've been trying to get them time in practice and out on the floor so that they can establish a solid role for us next year. But yeah, the sophomore group that I have this year transitioning into their junior year, that's the group that will have primary time on the court.
Right.
And a couple of those kids, actually 3 out of the 4, now let me back up. Yeah, 3 out of the 4 have not been playing basketball consistently over the past couple of years. So we're essentially starting over this year with some of the sophomore kids. Alyssa Wheeler, she didn't play last year. Felicia Valenzuela, she didn't play last year. They have athletic ability and they have lots of potential. And so this year we've been working on them, just getting time on the court, feeling comfortable on the court, feeling comfortable with the roles. And then next year, more is going to be required of them. Jada Donovan, she's a transfer student. She didn't even get on the court till halfway through the season because of the transfer rules.
Right.
So that's a little bit difficult. Erin Collin, she's a big time softball player. And so she's just a great athlete. She played with us last year, and then this year she'll have a solid role just because she's just a great athlete. And so we've called on her this year, not from an offensive standpoint, but more of a defensive standpoint, because she's so strong, incredibly strong. So again, trying to fit those different pieces of the puzzle together to be successful, you just do what you can.
Again, we were speaking with Camp Verde High School girls basketball coach Mark Showers. The Cowboys finished their season 8-10 overall, earning them a number 24 seed in the 3A. Coach, we've just got a couple minutes here, so I want to go into the off season. What is the plan for the off season? I know a few coaches run some tournaments during the summer. Do you have any plans for that? And where is an area you'd like to see this team improve in next year?
Yeah, so in the summertime, I essentially do the same thing. We only run during the month of June. One of the things I learned a long, long time ago is that you can put yourself into a position where it becomes all-consuming, and that's not good for you or the kids. These are still high school teenagers. So we run in the month of June. We'll get together at least once or twice a week. We'll try to get into maybe a league or a tournament during that month and give the kids an opportunity to get on the court. When we work out and practice, again, what I'll be doing is evaluating what we currently have and what we bring up to determine what defensive strategies we're going to use going into the next season, what offensive strategies we're going to use. And then we use the summer to kind of build a foundation. So then when we start this next November, we're ready to build in on that foundation, whatever it is we need to be successful.
Just real quick, Coach, you kind of mentioned, the all-consuming aspect of basketball. I'm just curious, have you you talked about it, learning it through the years. Is it just from raising your own family, or just kind of seeing the toll that focusing all the time on basketball can have on a player? I mean, just what kind of had that mindset change for you when it comes to, like you said, just focusing really kind of through the month of June?
Well, sure. I raised 3 kids. Two of my kids were high-level athletes, played in college. And I've heard for years and years and years that the only way you can be successful at the next level is to play club and just, put all that time and effort into one activity. But when I went through high school, I wanted to be involved in as many things as possible. My friends were going to different sports. my 3 kids played 3 sports. And if my son hadn't passed away, then maybe he would have played in college. But my daughters played 3 sports and they played college basketball. So the bottom line is, I think kids need a variety of opportunities. And for people to focus on one thing that consumes them, I don't think is healthy. I don't think it's healthy for a family. I don't think it's healthy for kids. Now, people think I'm crazy and I'm old school, but I've been doing this a lot. This is my 32nd year coaching.
Yep.
And another thing, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I was on the edge of getting my 500th career win, with the girls basketball team. And I didn't think this team could do it.
Yeah.
And they did. So I ended up with 500 wins, but, with kind of that resume, I've seen a lot go on, and kids need to be kids. And I think focusing on just one thing all the time is not healthy for anybody.
Well, I think that's a great spot to end, Coach. I, as always, Camp Verde High School girls basketball coach Mark Showers, thank you very much for taking the time to hear me ramble questions at you and answer them. I really appreciate the time as usual, Coach. Congrats on finishing the season. Congrats on 500 wins. I can't wait to see you get to 1,000. And I really appreciate it, Coach. Thank you, as always, for taking the time.
Hey, you bet. My pleasure.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Coconino girls basketball coach Cassie Schrader. Don't go anywhere. Off the bench, we'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined now by a familiar face of the program. She is Coconino High School girls basketball coach Cassie Schrader. Coach Schrader, welcome back onto the program.
Of course, I appreciate you having me again.
Well, Coach, we're always happy to have you. The Panthers finished their season 10-7 overall, earning them the number 18 seed in the 4A. Coach, that gave you guys a play-in matchup against Greenway High School. How did it go against, I believe their mascot is the Demons?
Yeah, no, it was a tough game. It was very tough. They're very, very physical, very strong. I would say they're a little sloppier on offense than we were, but defensively, man, it was kind of hard to keep up with them. Not to mention there's kind of like a lid over the basket. Like, we got a bunch of good looks and they just were not falling. Winter Husky, my point guard, had like 13 of our 15 first quarter points. Like, she looked like she was going to, keep rolling, but something happened with their full court press that we just made too many mental mistakes. And they have like a 6'1", 6'2" girl. Her name is, I can't remember her name. She was huge. She leads them in like points, rebounds, steals. And she's only played like half the season because she's a transfer. So, and we're small. So there's not a ton you could do about that. We did about as much as we could. And the physicality and the size was just a little too much for us.
Coach, in terms of strategy, how do you sort of work around your size issues? Like you said, you guys played against Greenway's got a tall center who was basically just cherry picking rebounds and scoring points. I mean, it's pretty easy when you're standing over everybody, but I'm curious in terms of defensive strategy. I mean, how do you make adjustments to sort of help alleviate some of those size issues when you're playing against a team that's a little taller?
So, I mean, the only thing that I could, because we did not play anybody that big all year long. So the only thing that I could possibly think of was, we would switch from a 2-3 to man, we would kind of go between the two. Because man is where we get most of our energy from. We're a very man-to-man defense-driven team. That's what I want from them. And to be honest with you, I do not like playing zone, especially a 2-3. I don't like it, unless we're trying to really slow down the pace of the game. When we were in our 2-3, I just kind of made sure somebody was kind of leaning on her in the front and somebody was right there on the back to, help them out. And it was kind of the same with man. So I had two bigs available basically because one of them got injured late in the season. So I just had them, full fronting her, making sure we had help in the backside. And it just was, like I said, we didn't see anybody that big all season. So, I feel like we really did our best, but she's very high basketball IQ. Like she obviously was a good 5-6 inches bigger than my biggest girls, but, they worked really, really hard and, we did what we could, but it was tough.
Coach, looking more towards next season, you're going to get returner Kaylin Lee. I know we talked about your returners last time you were on the show. Kaylin Lee scored 11 points, including 8 in the second half in that game against Greenway. Aubrey Laughter, another sophomore, she contributed in the playoffs as well. Coach, experience is always great, but I'm curious, what is playoff experience, or I should say, how does playoff experience benefit some of your younger players going forward?
Playoff experience is something that you have to cherish when you get it, because that is just the energy, what's at stake for those playoff games is just so important to understand when you're young, especially for those two sophomores, my junior Lorelai Tesmer. I'm going to have almost a full new squad next year, and I'm okay with that. I kind of did that on purpose. And I brought 3 freshmen with me to that playoff game too, because, they've worked very hard. They've impressed me. And I decided to, make sure that they understood what the experience was like. And I think they were a little deer in the headlights, to be honest with you. And that's to be perfectly expected. Like you said, Kaylin really rose to the occasion. At halftime, I've told her, throughout the season, like you have to shoot the ball more. You have to, like, you cannot be afraid to be great is what I tell them. Cause they're so, especially her and Winter are the two that are most concerned about getting everybody involved, which I love. I love that. But, there's a time to be, I guess, selfish and, growing as a basketball player, you have to kind of learn when those right moments are. And, Winter came out for a few minutes with, she got elbowed in the ribs, and Kaylin kind of she took over. I think she scored like 8 points in the third or the fourth quarter, 8 of her 11 points. She toughened up, and she just was like, I'm just going to go to the basket. I'm going to shoot some more. So I'm really happy to see that out of her. And, Aubrey does that every now and then too. So I'm excited. I'm very, very excited for the next couple of years with them. I'm always really impressed with them. They work hard.
Yeah. And like you talk about Kaylin Lee kind of stepping in when Winter went down, she became a little more aggressive scoring with the ball, which is always great, especially with the sophomore. We've all played youth basketball, youth sports in general. We all know it's tough when you're an underclassman to try to get time, or, if you're not one of the top players, to try to get as many opportunities as you can. And it's great to see Kaylin take that opportunity that was presented to her, with an unfortunate injury attached to it.
Right.
But, she gets an opportunity to show you what she can really do. And she's only a sophomore. She's got 2 more years left with the program. She's going to make some great strides next year. We talked about Aubrey Laughter. She's another one that's going to make some great strides next year. I think it's interesting that you purposely is a bit of a loose term, but you methodically decided to make sure that you were getting basically a brand new team next season. So I think it's an interesting strategy, Coach. I've talked to pretty much everybody here in the 4A and a couple 3A and 2A teams, and nobody has ever purposely given themselves a brand new roster next season. So just kind of bouncing off of that, Coach, what was kind of the mentality about, making sure that you had more of a senior heavy class, or, only a handful of underclassmen on the roster this season to set you up for a brand new roster next year?
So it made things weird for the 2020-2021 season to only have 2 teams. So that kind of made things a little bit weird, just roster wise. But, after I lost those 4 seniors last year, like a couple of my highest scoring girls and, those big pieces, I just kind of, my thought was that lower class and even the freshmen that decided to come in this year, I need them to develop at the freshman and the JV level before I felt like I could put full trust in some of them to come up to the varsity level, with the exception of Collin and Aubrey. They play basketball all year round, so they're going to go right into club basketball soon. And there's not a ton of my girls do that, which I'm trying to change that up this summer. Actually, I'm gonna probably run a lot of club stuff this summer. But I know it's taking a risk, kind of making sure I set myself up for a new squad. But I like that. I kind of like that there's a little bit of a challenge behind it. And, my JV team went 13-3, I think, this year. So they impressed me, and I wanted to make sure that they understood that they need just another year to develop before, they come up to me and take on that varsity role, because I graduated 7 seniors. A couple of which being super, super important to my starting 5. So, it's a risk, but I like the challenge. I like to see the younger girls figure out how to rise to the occasion, kind of like Collin has and Aubrey has throughout the season. Because, my goal is to kind of empower them to make sure that they're, like I said earlier, like they're not afraid to be great. Which I think that they are sometimes. That's what my dad always told me growing up. And it's hard to come into that mindset. So I think I'm going to enjoy watching those younger girls come into that and, start to trust me a little bit more too. And, I think it's going to be a good challenge for all of us. And like I said, I knew that I wasn't maybe going to have the same kind of year as I did last year. And I decided to kind of take that risk and, kind of start looking forward to the future with, the full freshman team I have this year too. So that's a big part of the future too.
Again, we are speaking with Coconino High School girls basketball coach Cassie Schrader. Again, the Panthers wrapped up their season 10-7 overall. They got a play-in game against Greenway. Coach, I wanted to jump into the JV team here, and we'll kind of get into what you look for in some of those younger players when you're making that decision to call them up a little later in the interview. But not to step on your toes too much, but we talked about it the last time you were here. You re-add the JV program, you re-add the freshman program. And again, from what my count on from AZ Preps 365, which is the website I use for a lot of my research before these interviews, the JV team went 10-3-1, and the freshman team went 10-2. Of course, I'm just kind of going off of what that says. Could be more, could be less. But regardless, Coach, very successful seasons at the lower levels. I want to ask, what does this success mean for the program going forward?
I don't know what that. The JV team beat Tempe. I know it says it was a tie, but I don't really know why it got recorded as that. But
11. We'll call it 11-3 and 0, yeah, Coach.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. We had a super successful JV program last year too, and that's a big credit to my JV and freshman coaches.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm starting to try and look a little more towards the future, which is why, like I said, I'm going to try to do my best to run as much summer stuff, as much club stuff as I possibly can with the help of one of my assistant coaches. It's very important. They all played very hard. My freshman team was so gritty. I can't even, it was so much fun to watch them. They just do not quit. So that, you talk about having all 3 programs, and your freshman team and your freshman coach has to be top tier, really. Yeah. If you really want to think about a really successful future. And I think that they did that. Obviously we faced a bunch of challenges at all 3 levels, but they dealt with COVID, injuries, close games that they almost lost. And, this is at both of those, lower levels. And I hope that they learned from that and, take that with them along the way, because like I said, it's really important for me to look towards the future with those 2 lower level teams.
Well, you mentioned your coaches. We've talked a few times on this show. I know last year we talked a little more specifically when you were first taking over the program, how those JV coaches have helped you. But Coach, you're now in year 2. You've already established yourself as a team to look out for in the 4A Grand Canyon region, having made the playoffs 2 years in a row. So I want to ask, how have those JV and freshman coaches not only helped the girls on the floor, but also helped you as you now have fully taken over the program?
So it's been tough this year, even more so, only because none of us really have assistant coaches. I had one that was kind of there sparingly because she's getting her master's degree. And then Chris, my JV coach, didn't have an assistant. Eric, the freshman coach, didn't have an assistant, and they're both, Eric works at the school and he's going to NAU. And so he literally had such a full plate. And, Chris too, Chris's fiance just had a baby last summer. So he's, working on top of being super dedicated to coaching and his family and everything like that. And they've still been people that I can always go to for, opinions, for just a little bit of help on the side and, letting me know what they see and being super dedicated to their girls too. And I really hope that the freshmen and the JV girls appreciated that, because those are a couple full plates that they had, and they still stayed very, very dedicated. And that's a big piece to being a basketball player, especially in high school, is just dedication. Because showing that is like probably the biggest piece of being successful, especially in high school, really with anything, I guess. But, this is hopefully where they're just starting to learn that. And, like I said, those two are dedicated through going to school, through working, through having a family. And Eric's wife is pregnant now, so he'll have a baby next year. So, and we're all pretty young. Like Chris is my age. Eric is maybe 3 years older than us. So we're all pretty young. And we're all pretty new to this. So, I mean, at the beginning, we kind of have to depend, all three of us have to depend on, how much dedication we put through, how much trust we can gain, not just how much we know basketball. So that's been really, really big in terms of them.
Well, and what a great reflection, not only on the coaching staff, but also to the players. They see these coaches who are balancing, some guys have kids, another guy is expecting a kid. You said one of your coaches was in school going for, their education, trying to continue that, and all of these things, along with trying to balance practice times and, making sure that your kids, the students are up on their grades and they have their homework done and whatnot. I mean, like you said, it's just it's a workload, coaching. It can be a glamorous job, but it really is a lot of work. And I have the privilege to sit back and watch you and all your fellow coaches handle your programs, and then get to talk to you guys about, your experiences with the programs and how you're building them. But I mean, really, coaching is very much that. It is dedication. And what's great is, your coaches have the dedication, which, really translates into your players wanting to be dedicated to the program as well. So,
right.
Coach, it's a good culmination of just, like you said, a lot of people who are really just buying in to
right.
what you're trying to accomplish in Coconino. But I want to ask, before I let you go, Coach, we got just a few more minutes left in the program, a couple more questions. Your senior class, I know that you had one player who really, really had quite a year. But I just want to ask, is there anything else that you want to say about your 5 seniors?
Yeah, I mean, most of them, with the exception of Winter transferred in her sophomore year. They've all been with me since they were freshmen. I coached them on the freshman team. I coached them on the 9-10 team, and then so on and so forth. So they all know me. They all trust me. Like, everybody just gets along, and they've been very, very good role models for, the younger kids, like the freshmen and the other sophomores and whatnot. Winter Husky she's like a top tier teammate. Anybody who coaches her at the next level is so lucky. Like in the Greenway game, she got elbowed in the ribs. She was worried that maybe she cracked one. She went out for a few minutes and then she played through. As soon as the buzzer went off, her mom was like, I got to take her to the hospital just to get them checked, because she was in that much pain. So that's like a top tier teammate. Winter Husky is just, she's a floor general. She's like our Chris Paul. Everybody likes her. She's a nice kid. She's very dedicated. And I think that trickled down to everybody else and, all the other seniors that I'm unfortunately going to have to say goodbye to, because now they're all like my little homies. That's what I told them as soon as that last game was over. But it'll be tough. But I think that them, along with last year's seniors, have really set the stage for, for the next few classes and everybody else moving forward. So it sucks to say bye, but.
Oh, of course. Buys are never a good thing. But, thankfully for us, Coach, it's always on to bigger and better things for these kids from high school moving on to the next thing. So, yes, goodbyes are always never fun, but we're very optimistic to see where your kids end up in their life journey. But, again, speaking with Coconino High School girls basketball coach Cassie Schrader. Coach, you mentioned just real quick some club stuff you're going to be doing in the off season. Is there anything else you're going to be focusing on in the off season this year?
Along with the club stuff, just the weight room, because that Greenway game was and I got them into the weight room a lot this year, and they ended up really enjoying it. So the weight room, getting stronger, is going to be big. is going to be another big thing for me. I did it all summer. I did it all season, the off season. So that's, along with club stuff, that's going to be a huge emphasis, just to make sure, injury prevention, getting stronger, feeling more, accomplished in other ways rather than, hitting 3 threes in a game and stuff like that. So that's going to be big for me, and same, looking forward to the next freshman class that's coming through, and just keep looking forward to the future.
Well, we are very excited to see the future of this program, helmed by Coach Cassie Schrader of Coconino High School girls basketball. Coach, congratulations on wrapping up the season. Best of luck going forward. I know we'll touch base during the offseason. We'll get caught up and see how your program's shaping up. But again, congratulations on making the playoffs this year. And I'm excited to see your brand new team basically next year. So thank you very much, Coach, for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Northland Prep Academy basketball coach Michael Gordon right here on Off the Bench. Don't go anywhere.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I'm joined now by Northland Prep Academy girls basketball coach Michael Gordon. Coach Gordon, welcome onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you. The Northland Prep Academy Spartans are wrapping up the last bit of their season. They've got a game against Sedona High School on February 11th. We're getting a chance to speak with Coach Gordon before their final 2 games. They got a game against Northland Prep here on February 9th, and then they've got one on February 11th against Sedona. So we'll talk about both those games here in this interview. But Coach, let's start from your coaching origins. How did you get started coaching basketball at Northland Prep Academy?
Well, honestly, I go back quite a ways, being more so of a player's coach. I used to run 3-on-3 tournaments with my classmates many years ago. And it kind of put a little bit of a fervor, a little bit of passion, if you will, in terms of coaching and playing along. At that time, I was playing along these kids until now, in terms of coaching. I started out about 9 years ago coaching my 2 sons. And then from there, I kind of just went up the ranks in terms of my kids making it into Northland Prep. And I've been coaching them since they've been 7th graders, and now they're 10th graders. And with that, I had an opportunity last season to begin coaching the girls JV program. And there's something about coaching girls that I really enjoy. Okay. And I don't know if it's maybe because I don't have girls, because I have 2 boys, but just really love coaching the girls. And I also coach the boys. So it's kind of a double duty this year.
Yeah. And you taking on both programs here, it's quite a task, Coach, to have to balance both of those programs, and like you had said to me before you got started, I know you have you told me you're a coach first and foremost. You'd said that you've always been a coach. So, I mean, what kind of sparked that interest in wanting to be a coach? Is it a personality thing for you? Is it just you got the opportunity to start coaching and just fell in love with it? Or, I mean, what about teaching and coaching these kids has really kept you in the area? I mean, it's kept you in this profession.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think each coach might have a slightly different answer, but I think most of us really enjoy like that light bulb moment when kids are like, I got this, coach. Yeah. And for me, that's what always has me coming back for more. Basketball, I mean, it is just 5-on-5. It's not like other sports. But those moments that the kids get it, they understand I got to set a screen or I take a shot at this moment. And for them to get it, that's what really drives me, especially with the girls. I just enjoy the fundamentals a lot. And when the kids understand, kind of like knowing to hold them, knowing to fold them, and they kind of understand that it's, I'm working with these girls and boys. I'm trying to get them all to play chess. And some of them are playing checkers. And I just enjoy each kid. And there's so much variety. And I think that's what really helps me because we got new players. We got seasoned vets, kids that have been playing a long time. And so for me, I just enjoy each day. I still get goosebumps and I still get butterflies every day. It's like, it's another day and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's great to hear the passion, Coach. I've got an opportunity to speak with a lot of coaches here in Northern Arizona, and a lot of them, different stories. Like you said, they've got different paths to how they became coaches, but a lot of them really kind of find that same spark you mentioned in terms of that light bulb moment where you get the kids to play chess, like you said. They're playing checkers, and you finally get them to click. But I want to ask, Coach, any challenges that you've seen coaching both programs? Has it been tough to sort of balance the two?
Yeah, well, because when I was growing up, the boys and girls, they played on different days. They played in different arenas, different courts, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there's been some challenges, but it seems to always work out. And I'm very thankful for our AD and our administration and the fact that they have these games back to back to back. So I know I have the energy, God willing, so I'm able to do it. But we start with JV girls, then it's JV boys, and we just go all the way 4 straight games. Today we only have 2, thankfully, which is a little easier. Mm-hmm. But the challenges, I would say, I'd be beating a dead drum because most of our coaches have the same challenges the last 2 seasons, with COVID and some other things, because we really encourage here at NPA, we really encourage the girls and the boys to do other things.
Right.
And so, we're not asking them to play basketball 365 days of the year. Though I'd be lying if I didn't say it'd be cool if they did.
Right.
But I'm also a realist, in the terms of, they have jobs, they have other sports, and so thankfully this year versus last year, I have a lot more kids. So I do have a little bit more to draw from, at least. Last year was a challenge just in the fact of we barely had enough to play.
Well, before we got started, Coach Gordon was wearing a pretty solid University of Minnesota beanie. So, Coach, I want to ask, what brought you over here to Northern Arizona?
Yeah, besides the weather, and reading it in books and think I was going to a desert, I had to do a little more research there. But the answer to that really was my profession, my other profession, if you will, and that's the U.S. Forest Service. Mm-hmm. I had an interesting story with I actually was housed over the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, and I actually met a pretty big wig forester out there in Ogden, Utah, and he really helped me to kind of go down this path because I love the outdoors. And we came out here in 2003, and we've been here ever since.
More specifically, of course, we're speaking with Northland Prep Academy basketball coach Michael Gordon. He handles both the girls and boys program this year. So, Coach, let's talk about the girls program first and foremost. Only 2 seniors on the roster this year, in Caitlin Elliott and Bertali White. How have they impacted the program this year?
Yeah, usually when you say seniors, it's almost hand in hand with leadership. I think one of the gals, Bertali, she made the comment the other day about being a mom, and it's kind of a really interesting analogy, but it's really true. In terms of being leaders, and they're pretty much like I was many, many years ago, a coach on the floor. And really that's a big help, especially with all these underclassmen as well, is it just kind of leaning on them to kind of be just that strong person in the room, because it's hard. Basketball can be cruel. And some of these girls, they look up to them as well to help lead them through these ventures of these games where it's not just about win, lose, or draw, but it's about being better ladies, if you will, after this. And for them, them being around and them being available, for me, that's like another coach. And it's very helpful to have them on board, here.
Well, like you had mentioned, the rest of the roster is pretty young. You've got 7 sophomores alongside 2 juniors, Noe Roan and Natalie Acker leading the team in scoring this year for you on the girls' side of the program. How do you look to develop the rest of this group, Coach, going into next season? I mean, you should be looking at bringing back most of those girls back. And where do you think they could get to when their time is done at NPA?
Yeah, that's really, really, really good question. I mean, at the beginning of the season, I was I used the word salivating at the thought of having a sophomore dominated team with a couple of juniors and a couple of seniors. And, the level you ask me is really, it's on them, really, I believe. It's how much are they willing to grind? How much are they willing to make that commitment? And I would say right now, so far, so good. I mean, for me right now, this season, it wasn't, it's not about wins and losses. It's about building the program, kind of building that culture, because there are some other programs here at NPA that they have a culture that is like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
And so, to really dig deeper is really to ask them to kind of take that next step. I always make that comment about levels. There's levels to this. First, yeah, we want to compete. Yeah, we want to have fun. And then, you want to get to that next level, wins and losses. And then it's all about, for me, as I make that comment, because I do make a lot of analogies about when do we get to that point of, can we cut down some nets? Can we be in the breath of, those others that are in the area that are just so strong, so solid, your flag highs, Coco highs, basis is coming along. Sedona, I mean, good Lord, we have a pretty solid gauntlet of teams but we got to get there first as a group. We got to get there as a family, and I think we're making our way. But stay tuned, because I think we definitely have big things on the horizon.
Yeah, Coach. And obviously there seems to be a lot of excitement from you as well. And I want to ask, what do you do to sort of build that culture? You talk about a lot of the programs surrounding you and a lot of the schools surrounding you. Obviously a few of them, I believe, are open a little bit earlier than NPA. But I mean, in a lot of ways, NPA themselves are also coming up. You've got an excellent girls soccer program at NPA that is really, really dominating the 2A. Your boys basketball program is playing well this season. We'll talk about them in just a little bit. I know the girls program you took over this year, and you're kind of trying to get them back into those winning ways. You make a great point about Sedona. Obviously, Coach Westervelt has an absolute powerhouse in Sedona High School. But Coach, I just want to ask you, what do you specifically want to accomplish to sort of build that, that sense of family and just that culture, like you said?
Yeah, Philip, it's for me, when I was asked at the beginning of the season, would I take the job? Would I take those next steps? Because I have worked with lesser programs, if you will, in terms of, I should say not lesser, but lower tier programs, and kind of building up my way. And really one word that comes to mind is continuity.
Okay.
In terms of, it's hard to build something, when you're talking about some of these gals, bless their hearts, they've had 3 different coaches in the last 3 years. And so I'm really trying to build that continuity. And then also too, we got to build it on the practice floor. We got to build it, in our local gyms. We got to build it out in the park. We got to build it in our driveways. And I talk about that a lot, is it really takes the whole family. I mean, some of these gals, they got some athletic dads and moms, and so it's like, okay, let's bring all of those together. And then we and then after that, we got to put in the work, Phil, in terms of like, okay, then we got summer program, we got games against all these teams. I mean, this year, and our record doesn't indicate it, but we played against some of the best 3A, even 4A, 2A teams. And that's only going to help us. The girls might not see it now this year, but next year and then the year after. And I'm always a big proponent of, the only way you get better is you got to play against players that are better than you.
Yeah.
And we got to get a little uncomfortable, and some of the gals are kind of in a place where it's like, well, coach, we got to take that next step, the level. We got to go up to another level and play those teams like you mentioned, because there's a lot of good teams and we don't have to travel far. There's a lot of good teams. There's a lot of good tournaments. We went up to Chinley. I mean, we're talking about another powerhouse team, and we got to play those teams, and we're going to take some lumps.
Yep.
But the future, we got to lean on the future, but we also got to lean on putting in the work. And that really, all those combinations together, then maybe one day we'll be in that same breath as Michael and his the soccer team.
Right.
And the cross country. Oh my goodness. These guys around here, they can run.
Yes, they can. Yeah. They're some excellent programs at NPA. I do want to say you guys are, again, smaller school, a lot of struggles in terms of sharing kids in programs. And like you said, there's a lot of great schools around you. But really, I'm a huge fan of NPA. I mean, you guys really do a great job with the circumstance of just certain kids not, choosing Flagstaff or going to Coco, whatever it may be. But again, we are speaking with Northland Prep Academy basketball coach Michael Gordon. He is handling the girls program and the boys program this year. Coach, let's talk about that boys program. Season's looking pretty solid so far. How are you feeling?
Yeah, they're really good. Again, it's another, to sound like a broken record, the sophomore class, if they can all stay, boys and girls. Yeah. Again, I use the word salivating in terms of the looking forward. We got some solid juniors. And our seniors this year, I mean, they're leading on the floor and they're making it happen, and they're showing by example, and they're holding all these kids kind of feet to the fire, if you will, in terms of being prepared and working. And so the program, I think they're both in an upward trend. I mean, we got great coaches, Coach Brent Hansen, Coach Dan Anderson. We got a lot of bodies in terms of people that are willing to help out and build these programs. And you can't do it with just a couple. I'd love to have a few more in terms of helping out, because that's where I started. At first, it was like, hey, you want to help out? To, all right, let's take the keys to the car. Let's start revving the engine and kind of seeing where we're at.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, Northland Prep Academy wrapping up the rest of their season here this week. They've got a game tonight on the February 9th. And then they have another game coming up on February 11th. We're getting a chance to speak with Coach Gordon before both of those games. So, Coach, for both programs, I mean, what are you expecting from the game tonight? And then what are you expecting from Sedona on the 11th?
Yeah, it's tonight is it's senior night for North Point Prep. So, they're going to bring it. Yeah, they're going to have lots of energy. Yeah. And, and I would say both for boys and girls, that first quarter, in terms of we need to match that energy. It's going to be loud. It's going to be rambunctious in there. And if we can match that intensity starting right out of the locker room, I think we'll have good success. Right. And then as for Sedona, that's another beast. You brought up the coach over there. I have a lot of respect for them and their program. It's a different world. I mean, they are a solid program. Yeah. And for us, it starts again in that first quarter, coming out of the gym. It's going to be our senior night. So I expect us to have lots of energy. And I expect us to be excited. We got to work on see what we can do against their vaunted press, and just have that confidence, because confidence is a big thing. And if we have that confidence and we play like a team, I'm really hoping we can give them more of a game than when we're at their place.
Yeah, and what a fun way to end out the season, Coach, a win on senior night against a tough school like Sedona. You're right. Coach Westervelt's really got something cooking there with Sedona Red Rock. And we'll get a chance to catch up with Coach Westervelt more closer to the end of the season. But again, Northland Prep Academy basketball coach Michael Gordon. Coach, thank you very much for sharing your coaching past. And, we look forward to seeing the future of both of your programs, the girls and boys basketball program. Sounds like some wonderful things are happening at NPA. And please keep us in touch as to what ends up happening.
Yep, I appreciate your time, Philip. And if you want to come, you got an open invitation on Friday, because this NPA gym, it's going to be rocking.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Coach. Best of luck on the season, or the final two games of the year, and going forward with the program. Again, Northland Prep Academy girls basketball coach Michael Gordon. Thank you again, sir, for coming on. That's going to do it for this episode of Off the Bench. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming on the show this week. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo, wishing you a great rest of your week. We'll see you again next time.